A promising victory against Aston Villa brought the curtain down on the most disappointing of Premier League seasons for Manchester United. But despite goings-on in Malaysia, Ruben Amorim, Omar Berrada and Jason Wilcox remain committed to a meaningful summer window. We're covering it all and your questions on the latest episode of The Theatre of Red. In what was Manchester United's 100th season in the top flight of English football and a 50th consecutive in a 138-year history, a final Premier League place of 15th accompanied a fifth-round exit in the FA Cup, a quarter-final defeat in the League Cup, and the limpest of losses in a heartbreaking Europa League final. What's worse, a staggering total of 18 defeats from 38 games, with 44 goals scored, while ending with a deficit of 10, ensured a bottom-half finish for the first time since 1989-90, and the poorest of the Premier League era. And what's worse again, Liverpool lifted their 20th top-tier title in the process. As we know, what began with Erik ten Hag commencing his third season at the helm turned into a memorable interim period for Ruud van Nistelrooy before the arrival of Mr. Ruben Amorim. Now, as I speak with you today, the cash-strapped Reds are in Malaysia after a first post-season tour of the modern era and have lost 1-0 against the Asian All-Stars ahead of Friday's trip to Hong Kong. Many are going to move to pour outcry over the performance and the result, which are obviously both poor. But this fixture has happened on the other side of the world, less than 72 hours after Sunday's Old Trafford outing against Aston Villa. That in itself is embarrassing, people, let alone what happened on the field. Although it is all about the fans and the Far East seeing their heroes in the flesh, whatever the result, this is about the £8 million cash incentive that has inspired this ridiculous turnaround for the club ahead of what is going to be the most crucial summer window in recent memory. Now, unless you've been hiding under a rock throughout this traumatic season, you'll know that Amorim is on the cusp of sealing his first summer signing in Matheus Cunha. The 26-year-old is set to take the number 10 shirt on a 5-year deal following a £61.5 million transfer from Wolves, which will see 3 payments over 2 years to aid with some bit of compliance towards the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules. For those not fully versed about the financial side and really and truly knowing how a struggling football club that has missed out on European football can afford such a deal, 3 separate instalments of £21 million can be ushered in slowly to accommodate further acquisitions alongside the inevitable outgoings, while hopefully remaining above the dreaded financial line. Any supporter, I don't care who you are, that watches the Premier League on a regular basis will be fully aware of what Cunha can offer this struggling forward line, with a combination of his strength, his skill, his footballing IQ and his finishing ability, presenting somewhat of a perfect signing to harness Amorim's intricate philosophy. And realistically, coming off the back of a season that has returned 17 goals and 6 assists in all competitions, 15 and 6 from 33 Premier League outings, with a poor Wolves side, Manchester United are getting a man who turned 26 yesterday and has just begun to scratch the surface of his peak years. Considering the undeniable troubles that the club has faced on and off the field, the fact that the Brazilian is eager to make the move because of the prospect presented by Amorim and his project for the future, well, I mean, that simply symbolizes the allure which still exists in the Northwest. This is only further emphasized by the ongoing talks for Brentford's Bryan Mbeumo. Obviously, he's another highly regarded Premier League proven attacker, turns 26 in August and possesses the skill set, similarly to Cunha, to slot into this new-look Manchester formation that will aim to truly revolutionise this attack. This is a man who is attracting notable long-term interest from the likes of Arsenal and Newcastle, with 20 goals and 9 assists throughout the campaign, with all but one of those assists coming in the Premier League. He has a year remaining on his current deal, and Thomas Frank's side have openly admitted that they are a selling club under the right circumstances, while realistically they're now being faced with the prospect of losing the French-born forward for nothing in a year. So the allure of 40 to 50 million pounds now is far more appealing. We've spoken with individuals around Carrington for quite some time about the upcoming summer plans, and the prospect of seeing maybe 2 or 3 Premier League forwards arriving in the Northwest. I can categorically confirm that United remain keen to pursue Mbeumo, but they do face stiff opposition from Champions League bound clubs, namely Newcastle. That said, United have held serious interest in the player since late February, early March, and he is aware of that. And just like Cunha, the carrot of a promising project is long sold. And that all comes about with the aim of creating a triumvirate of Premier League proven attackers to spearhead this system. Obviously, much relies on a potential deal for another forward and the finances behind this. But there is concrete interest in the player because he ticks the boxes of the required profile for this new look setup, albeit Newcastle are trying to put a spanner in the works and it remains unclear at this moment in time. When you consider this team as a whole, we've seen spots of general improvement under Ruben, with the defence receiving a notable shift in priorities almost immediately. Now, that wasn't the case throughout the entirety of the second half of the campaign, with many of the same old issues unfortunately rearing their head. But the concern regarding the setup was never about ball retention or progressing to the final third. It was this mind-boggling inability to convert ball retention to chance creation, and finishing that so often lacked. Well, I suppose outside of the Europa League en route to the final, where we once more witnessed these clinical deficiencies on display. But outside of that, we were given glimpses of what can be a plethora of goals en route to Bilbao. And when you look at the performance against Aston Villa on Sunday, it was about as good as we have seen this side under Ruben Amorim. The 2-0 scoreline could very well have been larger, but not for the failures of this side in the opposition area. We saw ample possession, multiple overloads through the very impressive Patrick Dorgu and the later wide deployed Ahmad, who played his role in both goals. Inevitably, much of the backlash lands at the feet of Rasmus Højlund. His inexperience, his lack of confidence, and an inability to reclaim the form he produced with the style and the arrogance of a Manchester United centre-forward from December onwards in his debut campaign truly coming to the fore. Now, make no mistake, I could speak for an hour on this topic alone, touching on everything from the club's failure to provide the youngster with the required senior support, or the lack of chance creation supplied by players like Alejandro Garnacho, for instance. But we have been there, and we have done that on multiple occasions. And I am more so focused on moving forward, similarly to what Ruben said in his post-match address to the Old Trafford faithful. It is very easy to get bogged down in the past and allow frustrations to lead to inevitable scapegoating and agendas. But rather than spending your time fighting and arguing about what has been and gone, instead focus on the here and now. And I'm not speaking about Malaysia, but what we have to do is we need to see a positive reaction with respect to everyone who has any form of an issue with the running of a club under Jim and his Ineos hierarchy. When have we ever truly witnessed Manchester United act so quickly, assured and determined in the transfer window since the Glazers have walked through the door? 3 days. That's all we're looking at since the last ball was kicked in domestic action. A deal is all but done for Cunha. We now see attempts to lure Mbeumo to partner with the very real possibility of acquiring one of English football's brightest attacking talents in Liam Delap, although that one appears finely poised with many potential suitors for him also. Say what you will about the obvious incompetence that this club has displayed throughout my son's lifetime, or the hideous, mind-numbing football that were served throughout the 24-25 season. I mean, there's no accepting this. There's no escaping it either, though. As Ruben clearly addressed on Sunday, there is an agreed vision and an aim to reclaim a sense of self at Old Trafford. And with the support of what is, in my opinion, the greatest fan base in world football, a few could argue with this vision when you can see the calibre of footballer that we're now targeting. Make no mistake, I'm not a protagonist for Amorim, his system and his ideology. I'm a supporter of this football club, just like you, and I've always attempted to view things from a logical standpoint. There are many players within this squad who need to go, make no mistake about that. And that will supplement so many of the plans for the future, regardless of personal opinion about individual players. A squad possessing a defined personality with an understanding of the importance of culture and responsibility is all we require. The rest, with time and patience, will always take care of itself. As I wrote in Sunday's instalment with The Observer, in many ways, the underperformance of that limp unit in Bilbao adequately represented this Manchester United side throughout the most forgettable of campaigns. It was devoid of ideas in attack, and it presented the most golden of opportunities to what is a truly poor Spurs side, once more highlighting that the men on the field are their own greatest enemy at the worst possible moment. However, I do believe there is talent within subsections of this squad, with so many simply lacking confidence. And with the correct additions, acceptance of the managerial requirements, and a shared belief in the dressing room, I do have faith in the concepts and ideals of a passionate Portuguese tactician.
First of all, I want to apologize for this season. I know you are really disappointed with me and really disappointed with the team. Second thing, I want to say thank you. We are very grateful for your support during the season, and I know that was really hard. I know it was really hard to support us in many games. But now we have to make a choice. Or we stay stuck in the past because this season is in the past, is over. We fight each other, or we stick together and move forward. Months ago, in my first 3 games in charge, with 2 victories and 1 draw, I said to you, the storm is coming. Today, after this disaster season, I want to tell you the good days are coming. If there is one club in the world that proved in the past that can overcome any situation, any disaster, is our club, is Manchester United Football Club. Now I want to say sorry also to my players. Sometimes I was not fair, but I try always to be honest with you guys. Thank you very much. See you next season.
Given this is the end of the season, and so many of you take the time to write in weekly, whether it's on social media or via email, I wanted to open the floor to as many talking points as possible and to allow interaction regarding topics that truly deserve conversation. It's what you guys want to hear, so I've listened and I will happily answer. Beginning with a question from long-time listener Param Subramanian. And he says, United's transfer window for the 2025-26 season is faced with financial headwinds and yet remains very important for Ruben Amorim's future, especially so given how disappointing and ineffective it turned out to be for his predecessor Erik ten Hag. He goes on to say that Amorim's preference for power and athleticism is well documented. Unfortunately, sections of United's fan base and the media interpret this as an underlying and near definite reason that will result in Mainoo's exit. This argument blatantly ignores that technique, skill, foresight, intelligence and composure, all things Kobbie Mainoo, are needed to complement power and athleticism. The question to be asked, therefore, is what positional options and advantages does Mainoo provide that can complement Amorim's vision and preferred style of play? Well, let me begin. That is a great question. It's one that is amongst the most discussed topics throughout this season. From the offset, I suppose it's funny how Kobbie has gone from an integral cog of an FA Cup winning side and the standout star for the English national team to a bit-part player of a struggling system with subsections of supporters effectively turning their heads on a player who was largely considered a generational talent only 12 months ago. His star evolved as one of the most outrageous at the club, with a barrage of performances and star-studded moments that often felt beyond a boy of his years. For me, I think of Mainu, and I'm immediately transported to Wolves and that now iconic piece of footballing brilliance, or his strike against Liverpool and his part from back to front in that Wembley masterpiece against City. And this is a boy that made 35 appearances in all competitions under Ten Hag in the previous campaign. And then we see his time limited under Amorim, his role undefined in this structure, and that inevitably led to rumours of a potential departure because of the benefits of pure profit and the obvious suitors he has at home and abroad, with the questions about whether that he could actually benefit from a fresh start even surfacing. However, I believe that people forget this is a boy who has just turned 20 last month and has endured a frustrating season with 2 separate muscle injuries that denied any form of momentum, while also trying to regain fitness during periods of sustained pressure at the club. When you look at the type of footballer that Amorim is targeting in Cunha and in Mbeumo, there are players who will naturally occupy the 10 slots in his system. That adds further question marks then about Mainu, given many believe his strengths are best suited in a technical perspective behind the forwards, given what many believe is a lack of natural athleticism and stamina to fulfill a midfield position. But again, many people do not invest themselves fully in the academy, and his role throughout the youngsters' run to our last FA Youth Cup success, for example. Garnacho took so much of the spotlight with his goals and his celebrations, and he was brilliant, there's no denying that. But as I reported at the time, Mainu was the glue for that entire team. He held everything together at the heart of midfield. Yes, undeniably he is technical, but that does not mean that he's devoid of a place in this squad. In my opinion, given the work being done to enhance his physicality, his endurance and his stamina, that's going to work hand in hand with his obvious footballing IQ to complement a midfield partner in this system. Can he play as part of a 2 that sits in front of a back 3 to link defence and attack? 100% he can. And what's more, he can get better at this with further game time and experience, while also being able to push further forward in times of need to affect the game in the final third, just as we saw against Lyon at that critical moment. But the club wants him to stay and has made that clear for some time. We've been told this for months. Admittedly, we're also told that he did require clarification on his status within this new vision. But I ask you this, what 19-year-old wouldn't hold reservations when they lose the man who brought them through and inherit an unknown prospect with a different system? Amorim has always valued youth, and he is fully aware of the potential that Kobe offers. I think people need to step back sometimes and realise that he has just begun his journey and has got anywhere from 10 to 12, 13 years at the highest level of midfield play to come. Personally, I believe United would be mental to consider losing a player of this talent. And furthermore, look at the difference of his mentality compared to that of Garnacho and how reserved he remains away from football. When we discuss a time about a cleansing culture within the football club and ensuring that we have the right character, that just screams of a character that we need in the dressing room at this moment in time. The next question comes from the guys at the newly established Green Devils, which is an Irish Manchester United platform. Thank you very much for getting in touch, lads. They ask about Bruno and say this: he's been our best and most consistent player all season, and without his goal contributions, we would arguably have been in a relegation battle. They want to be clear, they do not want us to sell him in the summer, but if a huge offer comes in from Saudi of 100 million plus, and the club decides to cash in on a 31-year-old to help fund the rebuild of the squad, do I trust Ineos to reinvest that money wisely into buying 2 or 3 players to improve the team, similar to when Liverpool sold Coutinho to Barcelona for 142 million and then brought Alisson and Van Dijk for 131? In short, I would hold obvious reservations about anything that Ineos do, just as every other supporter currently does. There is a natural apprehension about the steps being taken at the highest level, with significant cuts across the board. That said, I've always been of the view that Radcliffe isn't doing this to get rich quickly. Everyone is aware of the damage the Glazers have caused, and there is so much financial harm that requires attention. If we look at these optimistic plans for a new Trafford, and the desire to revolutionise this football club in ultimately returning it to the head of the table both domestically and on the continent, then surely selling your best player for 100 million requires every portion of the fee to be reinvested into the squad and attempt to replace the goals and the assists that he offers, no? Particularly at a time when you finished just above the relegation zone and potentially avoided even worse thanks to that very man. The worry you'd have is if they viewed someone internally as capable of filling the void of creativity at the hub. But then I'd say when we have a practical leader in Amorim who is so vocal about the importance of Bruno, while also emphasising that no deal is done with or without his consideration and his consultation, ultimately I'd be flabbergasted if he saw selling Bruno without sufficient attempts at replacement as anything other than a betrayal of his confidence. Further to that, I think he would walk away without a second thought if he ever did feel betrayed in this. So I believe that if the club entertained the idea of selling the man and redeveloping the squad with the money earned, it would have to be the most calculated of plans that Amorim spearheaded himself. Given that and his obvious desire to build this new look team around his captain, I just don't see a world where they sell him for any amount, regardless of what's going on. And I'd be devastated if they did sell him, to be perfectly honest. Moving on to number 3, Mr. Jer Coyne has got in touch via Twitter and provided a double-barreled question. So he asks, do we have faith that Ineos are capable of bringing the club back to the top table and that they can deliver the type of colossal overhaul this squad badly needs? And if indeed they can do that, is Ruben Amorim the correct coach to guide the team back to where it needs to be? Well, for me, Jer, I believe the latter holds the key to the entire scenario. I have had the privilege of following continental football for many years through my work with BTL, and I've spent ample time with sporting supporters and officials, particularly in the run-up to Amorim coming. Football is a simple game that we choose to complicate on the basis of God only knows what. Jer. Without question, there is no guarantee that success is transferable from one avenue to another. Now, in that, the miraculous work that he achieved at Sporting does not necessarily mean that he can convert that into guaranteed victory in Manchester. That said, I do not buy into the tagline that his system is not designed to work in England, not for a minute. I have backed every manager post-Fergie, maybe with the exception of Moyes, who I felt was incapable of delivering the required package in the hot seat. But even with that, I did give him the benefit of the doubt and supported him for as long as I could. People often call me a romantic and criticise my affiliation with certain individuals as blind loyalty. But I can't help this glass half full mentality. It's funny, considering we've had our worst Premier League showing. I do believe that Amorim can recreate his Portuguese ideals with the required support, even though I'm still hurting. And trust me, I'm angry about a meek exit from European competition. The lack of increased scheduling will ultimately provide further time on the training field to enhance his vision and then gain a better understanding with a smaller group of players. If I come back to the start and regarding Ineos, we've already discussed the quick work taking place with Cunha and attempts from Mbuemo and Delap. But you also see the shrewd January signings of Dorgu and Heaven, with the latter proving to be one of the greatest steals we have seen in recent years. Undeniably, there is a project here, and more importantly, and focusing on the double-barrel question itself, there's a unified project with set KPIs, an agreement in what is required across the board. You see Jason Wilcox spearheading the recruitment side and targeting some of the most highly sought-after youngsters in the world game. People have concerns about Ineos, and rightfully so, but they use underwhelming French attempts as a way of downing their capabilities in the Northwest. What I would say to that is if we are unable to transfer success stories from one club to another, we should hold the same stance with what is deemed as an unsuccessful campaign elsewhere. No? Look at Anthony and his rejuvenation from England to Spain. Good can come from bad, and sometimes the correct partnership at the correct time can produce the desired results. Truthfully, we've not seen much throughout a horrific campaign to suggest that this will go anyway other than the same manner. But now is the time to start judging both firmly, and the actions of both during the off-season and into a new campaign, I fully believe will tell us all we need to know throughout the summer and into the opening weeks of the new season. On to our next question, and it comes from Reza Padramnia, the brains behind the brilliant UnitedArts.com, all the artwork for our site, and also a contributor for the Theatre of Red. Reza has got in touch and asked an interesting question, and it relates actually to an article that he published this week. He asks, which players would I like the club to sign, even if they aren't the most technically gifted, but have the required character to fit such a role in this team? For me, when considering the targets that we're pursuing and the options that we already have in midfield, I think to look outside of what I've already discussed, I probably look at what is behind the midfield when considering this type of question. One player that I've been speaking about for quite some time, and he could have supplied everything from experience to proven ability, is somebody like Jonathan Tah. But given the Bayer Leverkusen man is on the cusp of joining Bayern Munich, that is obviously a non-talker. However, it does open the door then for somebody like Kim at Bayern, who is expected to play a bit part role after Tah's arrival. And with some undecided about him in Germany, this is a player who was regarded as an elite defender in Italy and now has 79 appearances for Bayern. At 28, he's won league titles in Italy and Germany, as well as Serie A's best defender in 2023. And he could supply further veteran information for youngsters like Heaven and Yarrow. Then the question regarding Onana continues to surface, and the prospect of acquiring a proven leader or somebody with the desire to establish themselves in the most testing environment, maybe just outside of Real Madrid. Money is always going to play a role there, and the book value of Onana, coupled with his falling stock, does not make it easy to offload these players that some would sooner wash their hands with. When you consider players out of contract, the biggest name is naturally David De Gea. But personally, I don't believe in revisiting something that has been and gone. You can look at Villa and you can look at someone like Emi Martinez. And despite the obviously erratic personality and characteristics, I mean, that was truly epitomized by his mind-boggling challenge at Old Trafford on Sunday. He has won on the grandest stage and earned back-to-back Yashin Awards in 23 and 24. But then you look on the other side of the spectrum and you focus on somebody like Lucas Chevalier at Lille. Now, this is a player I admire very much so. He's 23 years old with close to 130 appearances to his name. He's got a reported transfer fee of somewhere in the region of 30 to 40 million euros. He's a player touted as the next big thing in France, and he's attracted the attention of Barcelona already. Truthfully, at that age, especially with a goalkeeper, it's hard to know if he has the required mentality to enter a wounded dressing room and to affect a positive mentality. But there is a definite interest should a move for Onana out of Manchester's surface. Without question, he is a player I really like. And going hand in hand with this overhaul of the squad presents an age profile to match Ineos's vision of signing the next big thing instead of overspending on somebody already there. Now, Aston Villa, ironically, when I'm mentioning Emi Martinez, are also rumoured to be interested in Chevalier. So I've not heard massive amounts other than the club are interested in him. And I think we've got time for one more question. And this one comes from the guitarist of the brilliant Pretty Cartel, who just so happens to be a lifelong Manchester United supporter. His name is Mr. Ian Curry. And before I get to his question, I can confirm that the band are currently putting together a set list for a run of gigs in 2026. Very exciting times ahead for the boys. Ian is obviously a long-suffering supporter, and he asks me straight up if Amorim's 3-4-3 actually works in the Premier League, and what current squad member, if any, do I feel Amorim could build the team around. Okay, I'll begin with the latter part and list the players off the top of my head that I class as those who could likely build a successful squad around. I recently tweeted about the health of the defensive situation given our two promising youngsters. It remains unclear how Martinez will return after his injury, but make no mistake, he is tailor-made for this system. His ball-playing and ball-carrying ability and natural presence to be able to move slightly forward from the defence up into that defensive midfield position is exactly what Amorim requires. And then when you place him alongside the likes of Heaven, Yarrow, De Ligt and Maguire, that's 5 extremely good defenders to rotate. And it's not even factoring the versatility of Nasser Mazraoui and the potential of the likes of Tyler Fredrickson. In midfield, I really like the destroyer capabilities of Manuel Ugarte. And I can't for the life of me understand why he's got such a negative stance within subsections of the support. He wasn't bought to be a creator, he was bought to be a destroyer, and he does exactly that. Also, I've obviously already spoken about Kobbie Mainoo. He's an obvious choice. We're only scratching the surface then as well of what Mason Mount can possibly achieve. As long as he remains fit and able, we have a tried and tested European winning player who has the required attitude and character for this rebuild. Obviously, Bruno Fernandes, and then you speak about Joshua Zirkzee, a splendidly technical player. And then you move on to the right and you see someone like Ahmad. I mean, he's a footballer who can beat any team on any day. He's just that good and he has the capability to get even better. I believe Garnacho will go, And this is something that I've been vocal about for many months. This didn't just come to fruition after his post-match Bilbao antics. Then obvious names people will discuss as further departures land at the feet of Onana, Luke Shaw, Diogo Dalot, Casemiro and Højlund. Although Dalot is highly regarded by Amorim, and I think he provides a nice squad option there. I think he's a versatile player. Onana is simple. As I've said, it's about determining if a destination is there to recoup book value and a replacement. Shaw, as much as I would have liked him to deputise as a veteran in this rebuild, he's unavailable far too much. And despite the upsurge in form from Casemiro, his wages are a huge issue for the club. Højlund, like Onana, he's got considerable book value, and an underwhelming season doesn't scream of a high transfer fee. Personally, I'm also of the opinion that the club may continue to back him for the upcoming season, given the troubles he had in the transition of various key positions, coupling that with the ability that he highlighted in his debut season. That said, a loan is not out of the question given interest in Italy, and I have it on good authority that both Juventus and Inter Milan remain very keen on bringing him back to Italy. In factoring in on what you said first, I do believe that the system can work, Ian. Yes, I really do. It's about having the correct personnel and an attacking line that is capable of putting chances away. You'd be absolutely amazed what can be achieved with a confident team and how easily losses and draws can turn to wins with even the slightest hint of momentum. Take this season, and when you look back at it, we were poor, no doubt, we were awful. But the amount of big chances squandered was simply absurd. Take Garnacho again, and it's not that I'm trying to pick on him. He's just the first name coming to my head here. He alone had 14 big chances missed in the Premier League only, and that doesn't include any of the 3 cup competitions. Personally, I believe that Villa on Sunday supplied a template and a glimpse at what can happen if everything aligns. I mean, of course, as I've said, there are no guarantees in football, but Amorim believes in his system and his ideals. And given everything that I know about his career and what I have witnessed with his miraculous arrival in Sporting, I do genuinely believe that we can see a clear turnaround if a competitive summer window is delivered by Omar Berrada and co. And having spoken to colleagues in around Carrington, I have been given every suggestion that that will be the case. And on that, I shall leave you all to ponder the latest travesty in Malaysia on our post-season tour amidst the expected fallout and sensationalism across the unique world of social media. The feedback that I've received thus far following a maiden solo podcast a couple of weeks ago has inspired today's chat, with a host of you seemingly enjoying me speaking by myself. So, as a result, I will continue to do so alongside my conversations with the many friends and colleagues I regularly introduce from the industry. As always, if you'd like to get in touch, please do so at theatre_of_red on every social media platform. And feel free to drop us an email at editor@theatre-of-red.com. I am always happy to hear from you all, and I will get back as soon as I possibly can. If I can ask one thing, if you could kindly like, follow, and subscribe wherever you're listening, and feel free to leave a review. Each one of them helps the platform and the podcast to grow to new levels. So until next time, stay safe, enjoy this soap opera that is Manchester United Unfold, and I'll catch you all very soon.